Theme 8. America was poised between equally desirable yet ultimately incompatible courses of action. Look, I think this is the toughest of the nine themes, and I also think it's probably the most depressing. So this one's going to go about 4 or 5 minutes. Get ready for it. I think the best way to describe this theme and to start it off is to use a scene from literature to help. One of the best books that demonstrates this theme is Homer's Iliad. And in the book, the Iliad is the epic war poem that takes place between the Greek army and the army of Troy. And one of the main characters of the Iliad is a warrior that fights for Troy by the name of Hector. Hector's a brilliant warrior. He's amazing, and he's sort of the reason why the Trojan army has a chance. The army of Troy stands no chance if Hector doesn't fight in it, because Hector is such a great warrior. Hector knows that his duty, his responsibility, is to serve in the Trojan army and to be their general, to be their commander. But at the same time, he doesn't really want to fight because he wants to stay at home with his newborn child and his wife. And he values them more than anything else in this world. And so Hector realizes that he is poised between equally desirable yet ultimately incompatible courses of action. Hector knows that he struggles between both. If he goes to fight for the Trojan army, he is fulfilling his professional duty, but he's going to miss his wife and child, and most likely he will die. He also knows that if he stays with his wife and child, he will be neglecting his professional responsibility to the thousands of soldiers that need him in order to be successful. And therefore, Hector is in tragedy. Hector's tragic condition is that he has to choose between good and good. Tragedy isn't choosing between good and bad, it's choosing between two goods and being forced to make that decision between both. And that becomes the critical element that defines Hector's tragedy. And in the final analysis, I think, when we look at what tragedy is being forced to having to choose between two notions of the good. And so this is where I think we find America during the time period of industrialization. The choices for America are fairly straightforward. Either because America is a constitutional democracy. You've read in the Constitution the idea that there's equality within the law, there's fairness before the law, that every person is equal and every person is treated with a sense of individual rights. Whether you're rich or poor, it does not matter. That's the constitutional legacy of America. It's one of fairness. But by the flip side, the other side of this coin is that in the time period of industrialization, America was embracing something called capitalism. It was embracing the idea that the rich have the power, and that the rich are the ones that make the country go, and that the more money you make, the more valuable you are. If you choose constitutional equality, that means the rich and the poor, everyone is the same. But it was obvious that during the time period of industrialization, constitutional fairness went out the window. People that were wealthy had more power. People that were wealthy were able to afford more protection under the law. People who were poor didn't. And that becomes the collision that America is in the time period of industrialization. One of the reasons why America is so tragic during the time period of industrialization is because it's poised between these equally desirable but ultimately incompatible courses of action. On one hand, it's positioned itself as a bastion of constitutional fairness. But on the other side, it's also gripped by this desire to make money and to be economically prosperous. America, or individuals within it, were trapped between two ends that were wanted and coveted, but only one could be chosen. The result is, in some cases, America is kind of like Hector. America is going to be miserable no matter what it chooses. If it chooses to embrace economic wealth, then it kind of turns its back on its constitutional legacy to the world. And if it embraces its constitutional principles of fairness, then it turns its back on the money-making machine that capitalism represented during the time period of industrialization. In the end, there's an unavoidable sense of loss and a sense of agony in this situation, and that's where tragedy emerges. That's what tragedy is. Tragedy is having to choose between equally desirable, yet ultimately incompatible courses of action. Tragedy is having to choose between two goods and realizing that whatever choice one makes, you're going to be miserable no matter what.